Okay. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to the 5th session of SAANYS Connect. This episode is the first in our series on reopening schools. My name is Michelle Hebert, Director of Communications here at SAANYS. Now, before we begin, I just wanted to share with you a brief word from our sponsor, Zaner Blauser, and they have the Super Kids Reading Program. So I'm going to share that with you now. And then we'll get going on the program. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. And we thank our sponsors for helping us make this possible. And before we get on with the full program, I just want to go through a few more housekeeping items with you. And we'll get everybody in the meeting. Now, first of all, you'll notice that I've already placed you in mute mode. We have a sold out session. So in order to avoid a lot of background noise, I'll ask that you remain in mute mode, and we'll use the chat panel for comments and questions. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. Second, I would suggest you place your screen in speaker view mode as opposed to gallery view mode. This will place whomever is speaking in the large main screen and make the presentation a little easier for you as we share slides and such. And lastly, this session is being recorded and it will be placed on the SAANYS website along with many corresponding resources that will be referenced during this program by our panelists. So we will post them. We'll post the video of the program, and that's simple to find. You go to SAANYS.org, you'll see in the top menu SAANYS Connect, and that's everything you'll need right there. Just visit SAANYS.org. Now I'm going to turn it over to Karen Bronson, our Director of Professional Learning.
Thank you, Michelle, and welcome everyone. And good afternoon, and thank you for joining our SAANYS Connect panel today. I'm Karen Bronson, Director of Professional Learning, and I'll be facilitating the panel. This panel is entitled First Things First, Implementing Health and Safety Protocols, and it's the first in a series of 4 panels in our reopening series. This is the 5th of a series of panel discussions during and beyond the COVID-19 crisis. And the purpose of these conversations is to support school leaders and communities by bringing the combined expertise of guests and practitioner members together to share their experience on topics of urgent importance to educators like you all over New York State. I really want to thank our guests for participating on this panel during a time that is really so demanding, both professionally and personally. So please let me welcome. Let's see, we have Frank Guglieri, Regional Safety Coordinator from Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. Thank you, Frank, for being here today. We have Dr. Alex Marrero, Assistant Superintendent in the New Rochelle City School District. Welcome, Alex. We have Emily O'Brien, our member principal from East Plain Elementary School in Plain Edge, New York. And we have Ron Agostinoni, a returning guest and principal of Shenendehowa High School in Clifton Park, New York. Welcome, and welcome back, Ron. And we have our very own Dr. Cindy Gallagher, SAANYS Director of Government Relations. Welcome, Cindy. Today's focus will be an exploration of some of the primary questions and considerations related to health and safety protocols and other logistical issues surrounding the reopening of schools in the fall. For the purpose of this panel, we're operating on the assumption that schools will physically reopen in some capacity. However, it's important to note that this is an unverified assumption at this point, and our panelists have the same questions you do as we await further guidance. I think we have certainly learned that this is a constantly changing landscape, and that is still very much the case. As always, you will have the opportunity to ask questions or share your thoughts and ideas or examples. So please feel free to. Today, you have such a large group. In the interest of time and the lack of too many people being unmuted at once, I will be posing questions that you pose in the chat bar to the panelists. So with that, I would like to ask Cindy to get us started by filling us in on where things are now around the state and with regard to guidance. And what can we expect regarding information from the Board of Regents in upcoming weeks? Cindy.
Well, thanks, Karen, and it is great to see some faces that that I have spoken with or that we have met with in prior times, pre-COVID. We are going to embark today, and Karen and Michelle, thank you so much for putting together a wonderful series on probably one of the most complex educational issues that I know that I've experienced in my educational career. I think the only thing that comes close to it maybe would be in the early 80s when we integrated both general ed and special ed. And this is complex. Certainly closing schools was a blunt response to, and a critical response, one that was needed. But the reopening of schools certainly needs a whole different level of refining and intentionality. And to make it even more complex, you're doing this at the same time that you're still dealing with schools being closed in the instructional year. So it is with that in mind that I understand that for many of you, for all intents and purposes, it is fall now. You need answers. So let me talk a little bit about the state context and hopefully set it up for our other panelists about what they're doing at the district level. Michelle, perhaps you could hit that first slide. Just very briefly, I want to talk to you a little bit about state initiatives. In April, the governor, one of his first advisory boards was one called New York Forward. I don't need to go into all of the people who are on it, except to say that post-secondary was represented on it, but there was no one from the K-12 community on this board. So shortly after his announcement, State Ed said that they were going to have their own reopening task force. And we have submitted the names of 8 of our members on that task force. Shortly after that, the governor, about 4 or 5 days later, said, you know, I am going to have my own task force on reimagining education. And that's fine. The more experts on this looking at this issue, the better. The problem with that is that although it was comprised of many educational groups and persons, there were no principals on it. So you can imagine that we were quick to respond to that situation. And I'm pleased to say, actually, the result of those discussions may be even a more direct input into the committee by SAANYS than had we just been a member. Our executive director, as you see on that last bullet, Kevin Casey, was able to provide direct testimony to this board for about 2 hours. And we've also been able to have 3 members acting as advisors to the whole group. At the same time, way at the beginning, close to the beginning of May, SAANYS was very determined that we should have our own focus group, absolutely talking from a principal's perspective. We think one of the most important perspectives, boots on the ground, they've been there for day one, to make sure that we were ahead of these groups so that we would be in a position to actually have many considerations and recommendations ahead of their recommendations. We wanted to provide input into the beginning stages, not just responding to recommendations at the latter part. So Michelle, if you go move on. Michelle, maybe we could hit that second. Okay, so there are maybe only 4, Karen started to take us down that road, but in actually only 4 possible options, unless someone has be able to think of something completely out of the box. No fall reopening, a full reopening, perhaps a partial reopening in different regions, depending upon the infection rate or spikes, or perhaps a hybrid reopening with some in-person classes within buildings and then some distance learning. One of the things that we did right at the beginning was to do a very informal survey of our board of directors and our government relations committee. And you can see in the text in red that about 84% of that group indicated that they thought that the most likely scenario would be a hybrid situation. And only 8% thought that it would all be totally remote, pretty much no opening, just remote. Next slide, if we could there, Michelle, thank you. Part of that survey, that informal survey, we also asked people to think about what they have learned through this experience since March, lessons learned. This is just a partial list of what, but certainly one of the themes coming through is, we really know that relationships matter. That is the one thing that I heard over and over, relationships matter. In fact, ironically, at a time when we were less in person and less person-to-person contact, many of our administrators thought that they had better relationships with students and parents throughout the whole closing down of school. Some other things is certainly many comments that we needed much more training on distance learning. Certainly many of our structures were way inflexible, and if we're going to really respond in the fall in a way that we need to, we think we need to look at a whole bunch of more flexibility. And then one of the last ones certainly was technology. Our technology departments that once were mostly in-house support now function pretty much as a resource to students and families, and their range and their input in terms of technology had expanded threefold. So there is a lot going on. We've been in contact. What I would love to have happen too is an extension or extending you the opportunity. We'd love to hear from our members or anybody on these. So if you have any thoughts or any comments, in addition to the chat room, feel free to give us an email, and we will try very hard to make sure that all of your comments are heard to all of the state efforts and as we go forward. Karen, I hand it back to you.
Thank you, Cindy. A question came up from Tracy that you may have as well if you're listening, and that is, will the presentation be available? And the answer is yes. Every SAANYS Connect panel is recorded. It is always posted on the SAANYS website in a special pull-down area that's marked SAANYS Connect. And what I would say is also very important to realize is that every panelist shares excellent resources that he or she is finding useful back in his or her real school or district. So we have had templates, we have had actual communications that are being used, and this panel is no exception. They have contributed outstanding resources that they are currently using back in their districts and in their work. Those resources, not all of which you will hear about as we speak today, those resources are also linked and posted with the recorded version on the SAANYS website. So panel is recorded. You or anyone, any colleagues can look and listen to it. Anyone can connect with the resources that will also be available. So be sure to check that out, okay? All right, so Cindy, thank you again. We're going to begin with our 2 principals, Ron and Emily. And Emily, why don't we start with you? So Emily, as an elementary principal in Long Island, tell us a little bit about your school, your district, and where things are right now with regard to your planning process. Because I think it's fair to say that even though we collectively do not have the answers at this point of what this is going to look like, schools and districts are now into the planning process in some capacity. So tell us about yours, and also tell us about what are the questions that are coming up and kind of hitting your planning team in the face right now? What are some of the big things that you are really wondering about?
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. I'm an elementary principal on Long Island, and for those of you not familiar with Long Island, we are in Nassau County. A small district made up of 5 schools, 1 high school, 1 middle school, and 3 elementary schools. I am a principal from the smallest elementary school with about 330 students. And I've been there, this is finishing up my 19th year, so I've been there a long time. It's a very close-knit community. We are forming or have formed a stakeholders meeting or group, and we are going to be starting our meetings next week. There are many, many questions as an elementary principal that I have regarding how we come back, such as we're all assuming that the staff is coming back. What do we do and how do we work around staff members who might not want to come back if that is our plan? What about students? Are parents going to let all of their students come back, and what is our plan for that? What happens when a family refuses to send a child to school? What are our obligations to that family? Then you think about, how will students enter school? Will there be temperature checks and hand sanitizers given? And how do we do that in an efficient manner? And how do we limit the congestion in the hallways during arrival, during dismissal, for specials? How will students ride the buses? There's a lot of talk about having the buses half full. I know in our district, we own our own school buses, but how will we be able to get all of the students to school if only half the students can ride the buses at a time? What about the nurse's office? Do we need 2 nurses' offices, one for cuts and minor things, and one for students who might have COVID symptoms? What about fire drills and lockdown drills? Are they going to be mandated, and what would that look like? Will the students be wearing masks, or when will the students be wearing masks? And does it seem appropriate for a kindergartner or first grader to wear a mask for part of the day or even the entire day? And what if a student refuses to wear masks? What will lunch look like? Will we be using the cafeteria, or will our students eat in the classrooms? Can students go on the playgrounds, or do they have to stay in their designated areas in the classrooms? And how can we make sure that our students are 6 feet apart the entire day? Are all students developmentally able to stay in one location for the whole day? Working together, turn and talk opportunities that happen in the classroom are great for students, but how are they going to change now? So these are just some of the things going on in my head as an elementary principal about the questions that I bring to the table as we start making our plan in our district.
Thank you. And Emily, where is your district right now, just in general, in terms of a planning process?
Well, we have formed a stakeholders committee, and we're about to start the process of planning for the opening of school. So we're right at the beginning. So I'm sure many of you are as well.
I am sure. Thank you. And, you know, I'd like to say that Emily, like all of us right now, we are in the land of questions right now, okay? And thank you so much for surfacing a lot of the same ones that so many of our educators have. I would just like to make a note that we are cycling back to this topic, the same topic, implementing health and safety protocols, on the July 22nd version of this SAANYS Connect series, okay? So on July 22nd, with hopefully all of the same members of our panel, if they can make it and if they would be so kind as to come back, we're going to go back to the same topic, because right now we're in the land of questions. By July 22nd, it's not that we're going to have all the answers by then, but we are definitely going to have a lot more information than we have now. So we're going to revisit this same topic. So please kind of mark your calendars, and we'll definitely, I think, be in a different place then. And thank you so much, Emily. Now if we could turn to Ron. Ron, Shenendehowa is a large suburban district in upstate New York. How is the planning process similar to what Emily shared in your district? Where are you? You know, could be at a different place. And also, what do you see as being inherently different at the secondary level as opposed to an elementary building?
Yeah, so I mean, some things are the same. We're having some of the similar similar conversations between elementary and secondary. We are several weeks into our planning process. We have like this ecosystem approach. We have one large committee that consists of a number of our administrative team. Like I said, we're a large district. Our high school has 3,200 students in it. We have 8 elementary schools, 3 middle schools. So we have administrators from all levels as part of this one large committee, but then we have subgroups of that. So our high school group will meet weekly, and then we'll report out to the larger group once per week on where everyone's at. And then we're connecting with the middle school group as well, because there's a lot of similarities between middle school and high school. A lot of the same things that was discussed. How do we move students? One thing that we're really focusing is our schedule and how that can work. So our push, we've been sending things to our local BOCES to kind of influence the conversation a little bit at state ed and at the governor's office, in terms of we're really looking for the flexibility to follow social distancing guidelines without strict numbers. As you know, I could set the classes to be 12 in each class, period 1. And for anyone who's a secondary administrator on here knows period 2, that's out the window, because some of your classes have 16 kids or 22 and some have 8. We have over 2,100 courses or classes being taught. So students, they don't travel together. So we would love to have some flexibility there. And if we didn't have that, maybe with just facility numbers. So if it's going to be 50%, maybe it's 50% facility wide, and then let us kind of manage the social distancing within our school. We know that if we're in this kind of hybrid model, we'll say we did plan for, and we are ready for a full opening. No one really thinks that's going to happen, but if we don't have that here, we really can't kind of branch off and create something new. And if we ever do move to full capacity, we can't tell our community, well, we didn't plan for that. You got to wait 2 weeks for us to figure that out. So we have that, we've done that, we're ready for that. But with this hybrid model, we know our schedule will have to look different. We have a 9-period day. We're not going to transition kids 10 times a day. We won't have the time transitioning all of our high school students using one-way hallways and one-way staircases, and some of the things we're talking about can't happen with that many classes in a day. So we are looking at possibly extending our 9-period day over 2 days. If we're going to bring in half our students or a third or whatever that might look like. I know we're having a lot of conversation in terms of, and these are good conversations that we should have been happening, part of that don't waste a good crisis mantra, like our grading conversations, right? Are they equitable? Some glaring inequities in grading kind of that we knew existed, but really were in the forefront as we now moved into this remote learning. So we are really, we have a group looking at the grading practices and how do we make them more equitable. Conversations we should have been having anyway. We're looking at our collective bargaining agreements and how they factor in what we need to do in that aspect, and really learning from others. I think that's really important. We're fortunate our superintendent's on some international committees and some national committees. So our subgroups, our high school subgroup, our middle school subgroup, we're following what other states are doing, some that are opening earlier than us and learning what they're doing right and learning what they're doing wrong. So I think it's important for us to kind of branch out and look at what these other schools are doing. And the last thing I'll say is our actions really have to instill confidence in the community, at least here. So we could do everything right, and if we don't communicate it correctly, there'll be no confidence. And if we communicate it correctly, but we don't do what we're saying, there'll be zero confidence. So that's a key component for us, is that whole communication process. Once we get through our commencement next week, then we'll really start focusing on that. But we've been having these conversations for several weeks now.
Thank you. Emily?
I just wanted to agree with you, Ron. I think that's very important to see what other districts are doing. I know our superintendent, in fact, has been doing that as well. You just get so much information by networking with the communities around you and those districts to find out what's happening and working together.
And there'll be some guardrails or stuff that comes out from the governor in terms of health and safety, I'm assuming, and then some stuff from state ed. Like, it's going to look different if we're held to, we offer 2,200 lab minutes for our science classes, but if we're held to the 1,200 minutes, that's going to look different in a hybrid model than if we're not. I know some of the online learning restrictions and blended learning restrictions that exist that are kind of constraining to us. If there's not going to be relief on those, that's going to look different as we move into a hybrid model. I know our ENL coordinator, I believe, is on this call. If some of the ENL regulations, without having a NICE slot, and if some of that relief doesn't come our way, some of that will look different as well. So there's all these state education requirements that we're waiting to hear, because that will change some of the practical things we are able to do, whether it be with schedule or curriculum, or whatever it might be.
Thank you. Ron, just speak for a minute about communications that are currently going out to your community and to your families.
So our communications, we have, so we kind of have this tiered process. A lot of our communications, if it's going to be, if they fall in a certain category, go to our public information officer and our superintendent for review. But typically anything that's overarching will come from our superintendent, and that will go out to the community. That is less frequent than the stuff that comes out from buildings. And we've been sending out a lot of video type information to our parents, because we have so many and they don't necessarily know who we are, so it's good for them to put a face with name. But our communications, they're frequent, but we try not to overload our parents. So I try to send one once per week at most. Sometimes it's once every 2 weeks, depending on what's happening. Our senior class gets more than that, obviously, because they have other things going on. But our superintendent will deliver most of the information that is pertinent with respect to executive orders and changes as we move forward.
Thank you. Just back to Emily for a minute. Emily, did you want to just mention any of the resources that will be kind of tagged to this presentation that you have found helpful?
Sure. There's a couple of rubrics there from ClassLink. I don't know if anybody has ever seen that. It's a rubric to help organize and self-assess the readiness for remote learning and returning back to school. So there's a back to school rubric and there's an education continuity plan rubric that I guess will be on the resources. And there's also a very interesting site from Jennifer Gonzalez, The Cult of Pedagogy. And she summarizes 7 different ideas that people are considering for the reopening of schools, and thoughts and other ideas that maybe districts haven't thought of before. And finally, the TNTP New Teacher Project has a COVID-19 school response toolkit and survey questions to understand what stakeholders in your school system might need to know before returning back to school.
Thanks, Emily. And I am going to pose a question that came up that you can share with us about, and that is what's going on with regard to kindergarten screenings or ENL screenings in your district?
So for kindergarten screenings, we actually, we had an orientation online and we used a Google form that had a lot of information for parents, both information emotionally for students, where they are in their development, as well as academically. And we use that information to form classes. We also have a unique program in our district called Sail into Kindergarten. So we do a little orientation just before school starts, where kids come in small groups. They get a tour of the school. We actually do a screening then. They meet the teacher. So that model looks like one that will work well for an orientation that's closer to when the school starts. And if anybody out there is interested in learning more about that, I'm happy to share it. I can share our survey that we sent out. All they have to do is email me.
Thanks, Emily. I will share that. I live in the Saratoga Springs School District, and I have a little grandson pretty much in every grade there is in school. And our little guy is going to kindergarten this year, and they too went to an online system for that kindergarten screening, which seems to have worked very well. So anyone else is welcome to share comments on the chat in terms of some other ideas that are working in their districts. So thank you. Let's move over to Alex. Alex, New Rochelle was certainly in the news early. It was the location of some of the earliest clusters in New York State, very significant clusters. I think it's fair to say that New Rochelle really got our attention here in New York State very early on in all of this. And I know that your district in New Rochelle has developed strategic plans for different opening scenarios. Tell us about those and some of the recommended safety action plans that you're putting in place there, what your communication looks like, but just kind of tell us the story of New Rochelle, really, since this began and where you are now.
Sure, definitely, Karen. Thank you for that. We were in the news, and we continue to be in the news. We're going to change the narrative for being innovative and really spearheading in collaboration, as Emily and Ron mentioned, that this is not done in isolation, in collaboration, but we were forced, Karen, to come up with a plan immediately. So in New Rochelle, I'm going to paint the picture first to tell the story on how we learned and how we have become innovative, but also strategic in everything that is the unknown. Our motto has become, if we can predict it, we can plan for it. So New Rochelle became the epicenter very quickly. Outside of New York City, we had one highly publicized case that created a containment area. That containment area forced 3 of our 10 schools to close. It was a governor order. And a result of that, we had to come up with an interim plan, right? And that was a long evening. I remember it like it was yesterday, because we came up with, absent of any guidance and any executive order, we had to come up with what was the PrEP plan. And that's an acronym. Michelle, if you can put up the PrEP plan. And again, it could be passe for many, because we're long beyond this stage, but this is our initial reaction to what the pandemic was supposed to be. So at this stage, we had 3 schools closed in anticipation of our entire district potentially being closed before it became what we are living with now. And the PrEP plan really addressed the 4 major areas that we thought at the time, again, all novice to what was COVID, prevention. So we brought in our medical director. We're very lucky to have a medical director in our district, and she was focusing on the prevention and everything that had to do with minimizing the spread of the virus. Responsiveness, that was our communications team, spearheaded by the superintendent and her cabinet, and all the local leaders, which will be our 10 principals, in terms of how timely we were going to be in our dissemination of information about what is happening, i.e. school closings. Most importantly, I would say education, right? We are in the business of educating children. So that fell on my shoulders to make sure that we preserve the continuity of learning and essential school functions for our entire learning community. And physical spaces. So that was the operation / the health and safety precautions that we wanted to make sure that we maintained security and cleanliness of all our school communities. So that was a great initial document that we put together to, again, respond to what was happening. It was short-lived, because right after that, everyone closed, right? So what we came up with directly after that was the Distance Learning Plan 2.0. So Michelle, if you can put that up and go to the table of contents. That's all, not this document, the other one. Pardon, the other document. Yes, yes. So that document is what we are, it's more of a guide. So it covers everything from what is happening in our virtual classrooms, teacher expectations, a guide for parents in terms of supports, guide for students in terms of resources and supports. Anything that we could have thought of, it made it into this guide, and it detailed what was expected at each grade level, meaning kindergartners were involved in synchronous and asynchronous learning, clearly at a different range of expectation than a senior, right? So it was tiered in terms of what was expected. It also spoke to what we were doing in terms of grading. So with modifications to grading policies and not penalizing students, we decided to do a pass incomplete for the 3rd and final marking period. Incomplete's contingent on what we're going to do in our robust summer school. So we're still living in this in this distance learning 2.0 world that has really attempted to maintain the continuity of instruction. I said attempted because you can never replace me hovering over you, Karen Ryan, saying, Karen, you don't look like yourself today. So we lose that, right? But we didn't want to have what we've all heard already, a spring, summer / COVID slide. So this is how we are sailing into the end of the school year. But what we're doing at the moment is, if you're familiar with New Rochelle, and if you're not, of our, I'm going to say landmarks, one of our fun places to go to is New Rock City. So play on words was our New Rock enrolling plan. And the play on words is, yes, referencing where we are, New Rock, New Rock City, but also the fact that this is a fluid, dynamic, rolling plan, right? Absent of any guidance. Again, all of these that we've put together were right before we received some executive order, right? So I see some comments are saying what we're going to do about the summer. We've already came up with a great, robust summer plan. It will be hard pressed to tweak it just because the executive order came after we put all the bolts into our plan. But the new rock and rolling plan has started, and it is truly, truly strategic planning 101, and it's all inclusive. So we decided to branch the original 4 buckets into 5 major buckets. And if you can go, Michelle, to the new rock and rolling plan and scroll down to where it breaks down the committees. The committees are, first and foremost, no pun intended, right? What we're gathered here today for, health. So one major team focusing on health, another major team focusing on academics, another major team focusing on social emotional of all students and staff alike, a fourth focusing on culture, and a fifth focusing on finance and operations. So we call those the 5 subcommittees. The members of those committees are chaired by members of the cabinet. So I am leading the academics. My colleagues are leading the others. They're co-chaired with our building principals. We have 10 building principals. We have 10 schools. So a pair of principals in each of the committees. Staff members, of course, and community members. And the approach that we took with recruiting and selecting our community members has proven to be well received. We put out, first of all, we announced it at our board meeting, and we created a survey in which there was some prompts that the community members had to respond to, and also they had to select their interested subcommittee. And based on those responses, several were identified. We have ranging from 15 to 17 members in each of those subcommittees, and the work has proven to be invaluable. The work that each subcommittee is doing is addressing 3 possible scenarios. So what Cindy shared is the same thing, we just collapsed to 1, right? So 3 scenarios in our rollout plan is scenario 1, which is business as usual. What will each of these 5 committees put together? And then we'll have 5 major buckets feeding into scenario 1, business as usual. Some may be thinking, business as usual, what does that mean? Clearly, as educators, we know that we have to address the social emotional, the trauma, and everything that is assessments. So it will never be business as usual in the imminent future for us, right? Scenario 2, which is we're not returning, which we're calling a continuation of distance learning, perhaps distance learning 3.0. Clearly, if we're going to be engaged in a virtual world, what we have in our distance learning guide 2.0 is not sufficient for a 10-month calendar. So that's going to require a whole lot of reprioritizing of standards, and also taking into account everything that is collective bargaining and how we're going to evaluate and assess students. That is our second scenario. And that third scenario, which is the most challenging because it's so variable, is everything that is a hybrid model, a staggered schedule, that we are coming back, but yet we have a little bit of an interruption and we're returning, or it could happen more than. So 3 scenarios are being fed by those 5 committees. Again, the 5 committees are the health, academics, social emotional, culture, and finance and operations. The health committee has met and already has established their first scenario. So I know that some are beginning, but we are already, tomorrow is our due date of us chairs who are chairing the 5 committees to submit scenario 1 completion. And I'm happy to report that the health committee has already identified infection control procedures, protecting and supporting the school community with supports, social distancing measures defined by a business as usual return, and training, education, but also signage that is supposed to be broadcast throughout the district. Similarly, in my academics committee, we've engaged in an assessment calendar that has reprioritized the standards, but also upon return, making sure that we assess the social, emotional, and well-being of the students, but also the academic to see where we are, so we take a gauge of where those students are. Not to mention potentially an early arrival for our teachers to make sure that they, one, are well to re-engage in their professionalism, but also to make sure that they are trained with our new assessment tools that we're bringing in. So the work has started, and our timeline is actually July 2nd. As I mentioned, Scenario 1 complete by tomorrow, 2 weeks from tomorrow on the 26th, scenario 2 to be complete, and our final scenario by July 2nd, because that was our timeline. And then we found out that we had to submit a plan to the governor anyway in middle of July. So we're ahead of the game, and we're really excited in the progress that we've made, because we've learned that we have to be prepared, right? So we've heard the saying before, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. The way I'm saying it is that if you can predict it, you have to plan for it, because we weren't ready in the beginning, right? But I know that we were not alone, but I'm speaking on behalf of what we lived. We weren't ready, but we learned very quickly that we have to be ready of the unknown.
Thank you, Alex. And, once again, I'd like to remind everyone that we can't answer every question during this short time period that we have, but the resources that our panelists share are invaluable. And that particular resource, which does such a nice job of breaking down the subcomponents, so useful and so helpful. I will say that we on our panel schedule have broken them down similarly, right? So some of you in the chat bar have asked, how are you going to support students socially and emotionally when they return to school? There's so much to all of this that's a separate panel discussion that will come up later in the series. You can check the date for that one. Alex mentioned academics, learning, kind of revisiting instructional strategies, assessing where students are. For us too, that's a separate panel discussion. That one is actually up next, and Alex will be back for that one, because that was your particular area of expertise and involvement in the work in New Rochelle. But I think all of us, everyone out there, whether you are in a small or a large district, regardless of what part of the state it's in, you can look at things like this and listen to our panelists and look at the comments in the chat bar. We have Sarah, I know you're out there, Sarah Chaffee, offering to help people in any way she can with ENL questions. We have people recommending platforms that are useful for younger learners. Seesaw keeps coming up again in the chat bar. The chat bar itself is a wealth of information. And that's because we're going to find these answers in each other, okay? This is big sharing time. This is true collaboration in action, and it's exactly what we have to do. But the work that's been done is amazing from all of you in all of your districts. Absolutely amazing. So thank you. And with that, we're going to go to Frank, who's going to broaden us out a little bit more for a regional perspective. So Frank, in the absence of state guidance, give us that regional perspective pretty much from the low HUD, kind of Alex's neck of the woods too, and from your part of the state, and share with us what you think is most essential in the districts you're working with now, particularly around their planning and process in that region.
Sure. Thanks, Karen, and good afternoon, everybody. And again, it's my pleasure to be here, and I appreciate it. I am going to share my email in the chat bar. So if anything I reference or if I go too fast over and we don't get to it in the questions, please feel free to reach out. I do have one resource that I had given out. It will be on the SAANYS website. That's the basis for a lot of this planning, but there's a lot of documents and resources that really have been shared throughout my region, other regions. Some of you, a lot of you probably have seen the Capital Region documents that the BOCES put out. You know, there's a person like me in a lot of other places, and I'm sure they'd be willing to help your school districts out. You know, so they're the health and safety coordinator, I'm the regional safety coordinator, people like that out there to help. And I focus on that because relationships are key, right? So one of the first things to think about is we are in the middle of a pandemic, right? And that's going to continue and go on, right? So someone in your district, someone in your buildings should have a relationship with your Department of Health, right? Your local Department of Health have a, again, a wealth of boots on the ground knowledge. And if you haven't built that relationship up yet, build it up now. Now is the time to do it. We have time to plan, right? Alex is talking about setting those hard deadlines. That's a really great thing. You know, you have a lot of people willing to throw into the ring with you. So let's utilize those people as best as we can. You know, one of the things that we're doing here is we do a weekly roundtable. Even though schools are not in session and some of us are doing childcare, some of us are not doing childcare, we do have a dedicated Department of Health rep to education, and there we're talking plans and we're talking procedure through them, and they're helping us qualify some of the information that's coming out. Some other pieces of advice as we go through this, research that everybody's using for recovery and for dealing with this pandemic, because this is a pandemic, is based off of a 2017 document. Again, that's the resource that I shared out, where they use the idea of non-pharmaceutical interventions, right? Things besides drugs that we could use to prevent disease spread, right? Really practical strategies, right? And you hear everybody talking about them. Social distancing, right? Hand washing. Alex, I think you brought up signage, right? Those are the kinds of things that we can do, right? Constant reinforcing, changing our culture. It all comes from the same lens. So no matter what it is, when we come back, we know we're going to have a bit of a change, right? So let's look at our districts, at our schools through a very, very specific lens. And it's that lens of non-pharmaceutical interventions, right? That will help us, even if we don't know what our schedule is going to look like, even if we don't know what our transportation is going to look like, we could say, we know we're going to have to enact some type of social distancing. How can we do that? Another piece of it, and again, that's another resource that I would be more than happy to share if you reach out to me via email. We've built an attendance tracker, right? And it's funny, I met Alex prior to this panel, but New Rochelle was on my mind, during it, because you were at ground zero, and Alex, forgive me, but I was like, thank God they're not one of my districts, because I felt so bad for, you guys just having to live through that, and you did so well. And again, those documents that he shared are just really a strong resource. But, if we come back to a hybrid model where people are in schools, how are we going to track that attendance, right? And how does that attendance compare to what our normal, quote unquote, attendance is for our building and for our district? Right? If you look at a high school, at least when I was in high school, on a Friday, attendance wasn't so hot, especially if the weather was nice out, right? So, there's policies and procedures that we can put in place to help us track that, because it will help not only inform our decisions, but also inform our health departments, right? Because we don't know really what it's going to look like in the future. So, again, to steal the thing is, if you can predict it, you can plan for it, right? We know that in a pandemic, right, the level of transmissibility of a disease would help be, if it's measured through sickness, absence, and those types of things. So attendance tracking, very, very important. And as the budgets have shifted, people have gotten rid of attendance secretaries or people that were dedicated attendance officers, right? So maybe we have to revisit that. Thinking about the idea of recovery and reentry, while they're co-occurring, they're really two separate things, right? We have to recover in some ways from this crisis, right? And this crisis might be ongoing, but we also have to have this plan for reentry. So don't forget that as you start to build your task forces, right? And you're going to have a lot of people that are going to want to help, concerned community members, right? Different resources in your communities. We're down in Westchester, we have a lot of hospitals. They have dealt with this because that's where the patients are going. So how do they keep infection down? And then we're learning a lot about this disease as this is ongoing, right? But on top of that is to make sure that when you have these task force, you have strong moderators, right? That are recording and are controlling discussions, right? Because you're going to have easy questions that you will be able to answer that will come up, and you'll have very hard questions that will be, be harder to answer when they come up. So to give you for instance, I know a lot of you are in this, right? What does your scheduling look like? Right? And you might say, we don't know. We're waiting on state guidance. But you might know, or your transportation director might know, what is an impossibility for our district because it would be fiscally crippling is the idea of going to a split schedule. We don't have the buses. We don't have the ability to do a split schedule. So at least that's off the table, right? And then you can focus what is on the table. Right? That's some of the things that when you are working through this process, you're grabbing and you're capturing, right? We're a Microsoft district, we use OneNote. I know a lot of people use Google, right? That idea of technology and sharing documents and able to populate other people's documents with some questions within your district. Alex has 5 task force. I know a couple other people have 3 and 4 and different numbers. All good things because you have to look at it through your district lens. But as questions come up, they're not going to be siloed, right? Questions are going to have a multi-part answer. Questions might have different stakeholders needing to weigh in, right? So being able to assign those questions to a particular group or a particular person for an answer, very, very strong and important. On top of that, also something else to think about is when you're doing this, if you look at those, timelines, right? A lot of our districts here are coming up with static timelines and dynamic timelines, right? Whatever your new normal is coming back, right? You may have some dates that are typically fixed. Honor Society inductions, plays, concerts, right? You may have to make certain decisions as you approach those dates, okay? A dynamic timeline for your reentry is, and I think one of our panelists said it, is, as we get closer to coming back, we're looking to bring in staff first, right? And there are other tasks that have to take place as well, right? So as you look at those, right, those are things that can shift depending on your date of reentry, right? So, using those things as tools, right, can just help to start pulling things down on paper and making the abstract concrete, because that's really what you're trying to do. And some of that abstract is going to remain nebulous as time goes on. The last piece that I want to just touch on really quick is another analogy is when you are looking at your reentry plans, when you're looking at your recovery plans, right? You know where you were, right, last year at this time. You know where you are, right? What's that hybrid? What's in the middle, right? And we all seem to understand that. But think about that hybrid as almost a knob that you're turning, where you can increase restrictions in certain places, and then maybe you're decreasing restrictions in other places, right? Because as this evolves, right, you're going to have a decrease in cases. We may have an uptick in cases. Okay, so you may have to adjust on the fly. And the other piece, and it goes to the social emotional piece, and it goes to all this work that everybody's doing. On top of that knob analogy, think of flipping a switch. You can have the best plan and you're ready to come back September 1, and then September 5, all of a sudden there's an uptick in cases, and the Department of Health may say, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, we need you to close for 2 days while we do contact tracing. Right? So that does not mean that instruction has to cease. That means you have to flip your switch and you're going back to completely virtual, right? To continue as best as you can a seamless transition. Because right now the current guidance is we close between 2 and 5 days for contact tracing, and you may be requested to close or directed to close for 14 days to pass an incubation period, right? So these are things that are out there. So how are you going to have your staff and your students do that as seamless as possible? And I will leave you with is a tool that I've been using, forever, and educators use it all the time, but sometimes we don't use it in the midst of a crisis. After action reviews, right? And maybe the action hasn't been finished yet, but you can do it right now. Let's talk about what's going right, what's going wrong, and what can we improve, right? And maybe that's happening on a regularized basis, right? To help us refocus and redirect. So again, if there's any resources that I can share with anybody, you have my email. I shared it in the chat. Please grab it. I'll share it one more time, just, if people are losing the track in the questions, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank. Once again, the purpose of these panels, the primary purpose is sharing with one another, okay? Sharing with other districts in our own state, in New York State, your own experience, your own expertise. That comes up in the chat as well as from the panelists. A couple of questions. Someone asked again, will the resources shared today be shared on the website? And the answer is yes. These resources are tagged to the recorded version. Someone asked Emily to put up her email and really all of our panelists so that if they have a follow-up question, they can ask. Folks were interested in more information about that kindergarten screening process, for example. And I would like to ask everyone who is listening today, all of our attendees, each one of you, I'm sure, has resources and other things that could be helpful to everyone. If you would like to share any of your own resources from your schools or districts, you can send them to me, KBRONSON at SAANYS.org, and we will post them. We will tag them to this panel recording as well. So this is really about sharing resources. I really think that's the best way that we're going to continue to proceed through this experience. I would like to ask a couple more questions that are coming up. Neil said that we have used the Stanford School to engage in a process of stakeholder ideation. If you're interested in learning more about engaging in futuristic thinking connected to design thinking, we can reach out there to Neil. We also had a question from Chrissy, and that is, what tips do you have? I'm going to ask this of our panelists. Tips for newer or aspiring administrators. How can they be most supportive and helpful during these times? How can they start to assume some leadership roles to really be helpful partners in the process, newer administrators? I'll put that out to any of our members on the panel. Alex.
Yeah, so I saw that from Chrissy, and I responded in the chat so you guys can see what I think opportunity. This is a heck of an opportunity, pardon the word, to get involved, right? Because no matter in what capacity you're involved, you are assuming some sort of leadership, especially if you're in the room or even if you're part of a pod. So I mentioned the 5 groups, but in those 5 groups, let's, for example, my group, I have 17 members, including parents. And one of my parents said, are you looking for me to be an advisor, or are you expecting me to roll up your sleeves, right? So, you know, I smiled at that. I said, you, my friend, do not know how much power and leverage you have at the moment because you made the cut, right? So you're going to go out there and you're going to be my voice for whatever neighborhood you're representing, and that daughter that you have upstairs driving you nuts. And he laughed. And I think as aspiring administrators, no matter in what capacity, you have an opportunity to ask the question of your building principal or to your district saying, okay, what is the plan? Right? No one's going to get upset at that because they should be at least thinking about it. And second, can I get involved because I have a lot to offer? That in itself is something that you the learning experience is going to be invaluable, but also for those aspiring leaders, it's something you can speak about at your next opportunity and when you're in the interview seat.
Thank you. And I had the pleasure this week of joining Dr. Larry Dake's educational leadership class at Binghamton University. And this same kind of topic came up. And what we talked about was the fact that for aspiring leaders or new leaders in schools, this is the defining transformative time that we are in right now. It is truly transformative. You're in on the ground floor. Those of us who have been educators for years, a lot of things have come up for us to handle as challenges. But our biggest problems were things like, we use too many snow days. How are we going to change the schedule? How are we going to explain and implement Common Core? That was nothing compared to what we're in now in terms of a truly transformative time, and you are in it. So you are invaluable, and your help and your support and involvement will really make a huge difference in all of this. Cindy.
Well, to Alex's point, I mean, Alex is certainly a little bit ahead of the curve than some of us, but no one is an expert here on this. I mean, we've all started March when we all closed on the same day. So I think this is a pretty level playing field right now for all administrators.
Yes, absolutely. Any other comments on that? Ron, any thoughts about maybe at the secondary level, your newer administrators or maybe administrators who are in the pipeline, what they could be doing to really be supportive and helpful right now?
I think to echo some of the stuff Alex said was, I think to be available and to be available beyond 2 weeks from now. So, you know, we have some people that are willing to help and they're available now, but the calendar year, not the calendar year, the school year will end. And we know we have some aspiring leaders in our district and some go-to people that are available and will be available as this planning happens, because the bulk of this planning reopening is going to happen when the school year is over, right? I know we've all started. Alex put on that great presentation, but a lot of this planning will happen in July and August, and we're hoping to get some of those guardrails sooner, not too soon, where they're not things that we're hoping for, but at a time that gives us the ability to plan. So I would say, if you're a new aspiring leader, be available and not just, 8 to 4, Monday through Friday, but be available as we move throughout the summer to offer your assistance.
Thank you. And just in terms of that thought about the guardrails, et cetera, if we could cycle back to Cindy for a minute. I know there's still a lot of wondering if you could just kind of reiterate a little bit about what can we reasonably expect to kind of know when in terms of guidance from our state, from our Board of Regents, little time frame?
Well, Karen, that's an excellent point. I think, however, all the advisory councils or groups or task forces seem to be on a different trajectory, and that's what has us very concerned. And that's why we wanted to have our task force and most of the work done very soon to provide input. So, for example, State Ed is now just beginning its regional work. But on the other hand, I have some information that they want to go forth with the regulations, proposed regulations, new ones, in July. The Governor's Reimagine Advisory Council is working feverishly. I know that they have broken into subcommittees. Some weeks they are working 3 to 4 times a week for 2 hours at a clip. I think a July framework is where they're thinking of. So yesterday is not too soon.
Thank you. So once again, we look forward to revisiting this same topic, July 22nd. Michelle, if you could put up the flyer that has the information about upcoming sessions, before we start to just kind of wind down for today, that is the flyer, the document that you can find on the SAANYS website. It has the dates for the upcoming topics, upcoming sessions. And I would welcome you to just kind of keep checking emails, website for more information as it emerges. With that, and I would just like to really thank our panel today for the wealth of support and information and perspectives that they shared with us, and also our attendees and our listeners. I'm going to say again, the chat bar in itself is extremely valuable. It contains lots of great resources and leads on ideas, platforms, etc. We can see from our chat today that even though we don't have that much formal guidance yet, we will. There's not at all the sense that everyone is sitting around and waiting for it to come out. I mean, the work is being done now in our school districts. We're at different places, but everyone is just completely invested to do the best and the right things for students and everyone in their school communities. And that's what we see on these panels. That's why we're so proud to have them. So I would once again thank our panel. You just were terrific and you shared so many great things. And I would like to remind everybody you can find a recorded version of today's panel on our website with the resources tagged to it. And other than that, I would like to thank you all and just kind of ask you to keep connecting. That's really what it's going to be all about. So keep connecting with us at SAANYS and keep connecting with one another. Shoot me an email if there's anything you would like us to post from you, and we will see you again. Hopefully our same panel will see you again after a few weeks of hopefully some summer fun woven into. So once again, thanks everybody, and have a great evening. Thanks for being here today.
Bye, everyone.